This is me with my new Onewheel XR. Well, I actually purchased it used through Craigslist, but to me it's new, and so this is me on day 3 of learning how to ride this. I figured since I was going to go on this trail ride, my first ever trail ride in a local state park, that I'd make a YouTube video and share with everyone my experiences, thoughts, opinions after having used it for about 3 days. I also want to share with everyone one thing that I wish I'd known much earlier before I'd ridden this thing. Something that not many people talk about, that's a wobble, and you can see just right there I was wobbling a little bit. Go back about 10 seconds and you'll see it again, but every now and then you'll see me wobbling. A little preface: before I started this ride I was practicing in a park, going on trails, going on grass, through baseball fields, and I put in probably about 3 miles before doing this ride, and so the legs were already pretty tired, and I think that's one of the contributing factors to the wobble that you'll see every now and then. There we go. That was a little bump, but every now and then you'll see me wobbling. I'd like to think I was carving, but in fact it wasn't by design or on purpose. It's me losing a little bit of control. So the reason that I wanted to get a Onewheel in the first place was, you know, if you go back many years to when I was in middle school, I remember watching Back to the Future and the scene where Marty McFly takes the hover scooter and turns it into a hoverboard, and in an effort to get away from Biff and the other bullies, you know, that really struck with me, because at the time in middle school there were some bullies on this bike path that I used to go home from, and I always imagined how great it would be if I had a hoverboard to get away from those bullies. It was something that I always thought about as I took those long walks home. And so when I first heard about the Onewheel from one of my colleagues at work, I was intrigued, and so I started watching YouTube videos, and after that I was smitten. I knew that this is something I had to have. It was as close to getting a hoverboard as I would ever have. And you can see right there I'm getting a little wobble again. And there I was going from a paved surface to a gravel surface, and I think that contributed to the wobble, but you could see it wasn't carving, that right there was wobbling. And so, you know, in the last few days, my initial thoughts: the Onewheel has been a ton of fun. It also has been pretty dangerous, and it's been the learning curve hasn't been too steep, but it's been moderately steep. You know, I consider myself in okay shape. I play basketball once a week, but I've never done any board sports. I don't snowboard, I don't surf, I don't skateboard. I do ski, and so skiing and basketball are the 2 main things I do for activity here. And so this is probably the first board sport that I've tried to take seriously. This little guy is a a prairie dog. Prairie dogs are pretty common in parts of Colorado. You don't want to get too close, because I guess they can carry the plague. And so after taking a little break, enjoying the prairie dogs, I'm off again on the Onewheel. So I take several breaks along the way, and that's just because my legs get my feet especially get really tired, and you know, I'm still not quite sure. Maybe it's because I'm not used to board sports, especially the Onewheel, and you can see I'm wobbling back and forth right there. But So I think a part of the problem to this speed wobble that develops every now and then is that I'm just not conditioned. I don't have the muscle memory for using this device. And you know, like anything that you do for the first time or at the beginning, you're not going to be good at it. And in this case, I'm not very good at the one wheel, and so that's why I wobble. That's why my feet get so tired. You can see my shoes there. They're New Balance. They're some old minimalist running shoes with they're zero drop shoes, so there's absolutely no support. I thought these would be good for me to use on the one wheel, just because they say that you want shoes that don't have too much cushion. But I wonder if the absolute lack of support in these minimalist shoes actually contributed to my feet getting fatigued early. So the next time I go on a long ride, I'm going to try wearing some other shoes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this phenomenon called the speed wobble, which I've seen on some forums. Some people say it's because of the way the tire's designed, that it's so flat instead of having the rounded edges, that while it makes it easy for beginners to get going, it makes it hard for beginners at higher speeds, and that it's just something that you need to get used to. Some say that you need to increase the PSI of the tires, while others say you need to decrease the PSI of the tires. Some say it's not just the tires, but it's just the inexperience and the lack of muscle memory for folks just starting. You know, it's probably going to be a combination of factors. But I think, as you'll see with my wobbling, and what I try to do is I try to power through it. But I think as a beginner, whenever you feel like you're starting to lose some control or balance, or if your feet just feel fatigued, that you need to slow down, stop, take a break. Once you get into that kind of death wobble, just lean back, slow down, and stop. I love the one wheel, and the way that you stop seems to be very intuitive, just by leaning backwards. But as a beginner, I found that while it is intuitive, it's not second nature. It's not something that you're it's not an automatic reflex. And so there are times where you see me going into a wobble where I should just intuitively and just kind of automatically slow down and stop myself, but instead I try to power through it, and that ends up kind of being my downfall. And you'll see here pretty soon that I'm going to go into kind of that death wobble. I'm not going to be able to get out of it, and I'm going to fall. And so that leads me to my next point, which is how to fall safely. And there you go. Let's go back. We're going to rewind this bad boy. Let me get back up on my board. We're going to slow it down. So how to fall off a one wheel safely? Well, you can see there I'm going into a wobble. You can see how the kind of the rectangular shape of the wheel causes the wobble back and forth from corner to corner. But you can see how when I fall, I love the camera work, how I can just the whole time kept the camera on myself. That right there takes some talent. But you can see when I fall, I go into this roll. Well, number one, you see when I fall, I'm wearing my safety gear. I've got my helmet, I've got my wrist guards, got my safety gear on. Here I'm assessing the situation, looking for any major injuries. And of course, you know, the last step after any fall is to play it off like nothing happened. Get up, dust yourself off, get back on, and continue the ride. But so that's the last step. You know, the first step is making sure you have the appropriate safety gear, Helmet is a must. Wrist guards, a must. Here I'm turning it off, turning it back on, I think just to try to recalibrate it because it didn't feel too steady as I got back on, when in fact it was probably more my legs that weren't steady. So after you have all the correct safety gear, step number 2 on how to fall off a one wheel safely is to try to slow down if you ever feel like you're unsafe. Lean back and slow down. You know, that's easier said than done. It's especially tough if you're going at high speeds. One thing that, in my opinion, the one wheel is not built for speed. If you want something to go fast, then consider a boosted board or some other electric type vehicle, but the one wheel is not built for speed. It shines on turns, going off-roading. I think that's where it shines, but speed, I don't think, at least in my opinion as a beginner, the speed portion is it's just not safe. So if you ever feel like you're tired, slow down. But when you get in that situation when you're going to fall, we talked number 1 is having your safety gear, number 2 trying to slow down and be safe, number 3 in my opinion is to make sure that you jump away from the board. I've had experiences where I've fallen, and there you go, I fell and I jumped away from the board. Actually, you know, my momentum kind of carried me and I kind of ran it through, so I didn't eat it. So if you can stay on your feet, that's great. Jump away from the board and try to stay away from the board so it doesn't smack you in the shin, because that guy is pretty heavy. And you can see there I got stuck. There's some gravel, loose gravel there, I think that was part of the reason for me to get stuck. But you don't want that guy smacking your shin when you fall. It's a heavy sucker. So when you fall, try to fall forward, try to stay on your feet. If you can't, use your limbs to try to soften the blow, your legs and your arms and whatnot. Hopefully you have wrist guards on so you don't fracture your wrists. But as you do that, make sure that you try not to tense up, stay loose. So use your arms or your legs to try to roll yourself, and once you've softened the blow of hitting the ground with your limbs, what you do is you kind of tuck your arm in and you roll back, so that the impact is distributed and spread throughout your back. In my case, when I fell, my big fall earlier, I had my backpack on, and the impact spread through my backpack, which caused a bag of chips that I had in there to pop, and I had a sandwich in there that got smashed. But you know, that's small consolation, or you know, that's compared to a popped lung. Or a smashed spleen. I'd take a pop bag of chips or a smashed sandwich any day. There you go. Fall off again. If you can run it off, that's probably the best. And so, you know, at this point, my legs are pretty darn tired. I should be taking breaks. But it was hot out. I wanted to get home. So, you know, after you fall, if you have a wipeout, make sure you don't have any major injuries. Check yourself out. Evaluate for any injuries here. I was checking my scrapes, but really it was all the dirt and all the gravel in my shoe that was causing me some discomfort. So I just was emptying that out. So the next step number 6. After you fall, then the last step, which we already talked about, was play it off like nothing ever happened. Just get back on the board and keep going. Now, if you're a beginner like me, I think you are going to fall. I don't think anyone is going to ride one of these seriously and never fall. And for that reason, I think it's in your best interest to practice falling. And so when you're first practicing, and there we go, another death wobble. And so there, I was able to slow myself down. I went backwards a little bit to collect myself, and then continued on. But as I was saying, so practice falling. Go on, find a nice field where the grass is nice, the soil is soft, and have fun. But when you fall, practice those steps. You know, make sure you have your safety gear on. Try to slow down when you feel unsafe, and then if you fall, try to jump away from the board. Step number 3. Step number 4, fall forward. Use your limbs to kind of brace yourself, or try to soften the blow and turn yourself into a roll. Then after that, tuck and roll, and spread the impact throughout your back if you can. After that, make sure you don't have any major injuries, and then get back on your board and play it off like nothing ever happened. So I don't think my ankles have ever been on camera this long, ever. But I hope those tips are helpful for someone. It's something that I wish I had known before I started this trip. This is the longest ride I've ever had. You know, I did a couple miles, 3 or 4 miles before even going through this trail ride, and this ride ended up being another, I think, 5 miles. There you go, another wobble there. Slow down, boom, not bad. I think my major fall could have been avoided had I known these tips. But now you guys know this, and hopefully this will help you from having a major fall. You know, I was always worried about pushback, and there's plenty of videos on pushback on YouTube. If you're not familiar with pushback, then look it up. It's something you definitely want to be aware of. You know, I was aware of pushback. There I go, start wobbling again. Oof, wobble, fall. Jumped off. Didn't eat it though. So there's a nice, taking this opportunity to get a nice shot of the underside of the Onewheel XR if you've never seen it. And so pushback I was well aware of, having seen many videos of people falling because they ignored the, basically it's Onewheel's way of telling you, hey, you're going too fast, slow it down. And if you ignore the pushback, the consequences can be pretty devastating. But the speed wobble, as I will call it, that is something that I had never heard of until this long ride. You know, I hope that as I become more conditioned and more experienced and I gain that muscle memory, that I'll be able to cruise without having that wobble. I feel that will be the case. But you know, I'm glad I didn't get seriously injured, but and I still do love this Onewheel. It's a ton of fun. There we go, start wobbling again. It's a ton of fun. It's something that I always wish I had when I was in middle school, so I could get away from those bullies. You know, it's not quite a hoverboard, a real hoverboard, but I think it's the closest that I'll ever come. And